Since the Episode 9 teaser trailer was released at Star Wars Celebration, I've been poring over the sources that exist in the current canon to explain both how and why Emperor Palpatine, Darth Sidious himself, will return in the Rise of Skywalker. There are a number of possibilities that we can theorize about, and which we'll touch on briefly here, but I believe a path for Palpatine's return definitively exists within the canon lore. Using numerous sources from canon, we'll look at the long game plan by Palpatine, how the Sith Lord implemented and developed this plan, and how it will culminate in his return in Episode 9, the final piece of the Skywalker saga. I hope that you enjoy the video, and I look forward to your comments below. Although Palpatine would tell Anakin they would discover the power to cheat death together in the context of Anakin's desire to save Padme, it also demonstrated his ultimate goal too. 5 years after the rise of the Empire, Palpatine sat within the ancient Sith shrine below the former Jedi Temple, with his endgame being revealed in the Tarkin novel, to coax the final secrets from the dark side. Working together with his apprentice, just as he did with Darth Plagueis, Palpatine sought the ultimate power, to harness the full abilities of the dark side, and in doing so, allow Palpatine to rule for 10,000 years, to cheat death and find eternal life. But Palpatine wanted to go further. He wanted to control the Force, to become its master to ensure it couldn't strike back at him, a very Plagueis-like goal as seen in Legends. Obtaining Vader as his apprentice began this major phase of his plan, a second phase to be achieved now that the Jedi and Republic were annihilated and their threat reduced. Vader would help him pursue his goal of unlocking the secrets of the dark side, and the Empire would serve and protect him so he could undertake this important work. There's no confusing the true role of the Empire for Palpatine. It was an entity designed for his protection, a barrier between him and that which would stop his goals with the Force. But while Palpatine succeeded in crushing the Jedi and creating an empire that would serve him and him alone, Palpatine knew another truth. The Empire and its actors could fail him, proving insufficient to protect him before he unlocked the full secrets of the dark side. Seen within the novel Aftermath: Empire's End, Palpatine discussed with Gallius Rax, his protege and servant, his long game should the Empire fail in its duty. The Dark Lord used the game of Shah-Tez, akin to the game of chess, as an analogy, explaining each piece on the board had its own special role in maneuvers. But each piece existed for one purpose alone, to serve and protect the Imperator, representing the king in chess. And if the Imperator fell, the game was over. The analogy is clear. The game board was the Empire, and the pieces on the board were the Imperial agents who served and protected the Imperator, who of course was Palpatine. But Palpatine would then explain his long-term plan should the Imperator fall, should the Empire fail to protect its Emperor. If the Empire couldn't protect Palpatine, the Empire wasn't only deemed a failure, but the Empire mustn't be allowed to continue. A new game board, a new Empire, had to be created. Make no mistake, Palpatine was enraged at the thought of an Empire so weak. But even before it was brought into existence, he knew it was a possibility, admitting as much to Gallius in Empire's End. Knowing the Empire was not invulnerable, there may come a day when the Empire failed to protect him, a day when he hadn't yet harnessed the full powers of the dark side. Therefore, roughly 25 years before the Empire's crushing defeat at Endor, Palpatine planned for the unforgivable outcome of the Empire's failure in its one true role, to protect him. We should also note the importance of Palpatine not being taken by surprise by the outcome at Endor, neither in Vader's failure or the Empire's failure. Again seen in Empire's End through a discussion with Gallius just before the Battle of Endor, Palpatine clearly sensed a moment of grave uncertainty, chaos, and weakness, a shatter point that threatened his destiny. Threatening the course of fate foreseen by Palpatine was Luke Skywalker, who just landed upon the Forest Moon. Worse too, Palpatine knew his apprentice had failed him, recognizing Vader's turn in advance. Palpatine faced a failed Empire and a failed apprentice, and while he would attempt to turn Luke, that outcome wasn't clear, hidden behind the veil of uncertainty and chaos. He could only tell Gallius that he would turn Luke into a slave to replace Vader, or he would then demonstrate his true power, which I believe is a reference to Palpatine carrying out his plan he'd been working towards for decades, should he face a Shatterpoint like the one he was experiencing at Endor. Thus, by this point, the current phase of Palpatine's plan to unlock the full power of the dark side was threatened, likely on the brink of collapse. He faced a failed empire unable to protect him, and a failed apprentice who couldn't serve as bait for the dark side to grant him a 10,000-year reign as Emperor of the Galaxy. Having no foresight on whether Luke would turn to replace Vader, Palpatine did the only thing he could. Through his protege Gallius, Palpatine executed the plan developed for a moment exactly like the one he faced. As the rebellion was still on its way to ignite the Battle of Endor, Palpatine ordered the Contingency be put in motion, a plan carried out over 3 decades, ensuring that one way or another, Palpatine won and could continue his ultimate goals. And as the events of Episode 6 played out, it was a good thing he did. The contingency developed by Palpatine is, in my opinion, the most likely course for his return in Episode 9. But other methods are possible within canon that we can't dismiss entirely either. For example, the first possibility is a return related to Lord Mammon. As seen within the Fortress Vader arc in the 2017 Darth Vader comic, Palpatine had first-hand knowledge of Mammon's abilities with the dark side. Palpatine knew the importance of Lord Mammon when first finding his mask in the Jedi Temple's secret vault of artifacts, viewing it among a fascinating number of tools that offered unique windows into the ancient history of the Force, an important end goal for Palpatine. Eventually, Palpatine would uncover the story of Mammon, told to him directly by the Mask of Mammon itself, recognizing Mammon was unique among the ancient Sith for his focus upon creation rather than destruction. Vader would learn the importance as well, finding the artifact couldn't merely manifest Mammon's consciousness through others it possessed, but Lord Mammon knew how to use the dark side to pierce the veil of time itself, to conquer the divide between life and death. Mammon would indeed reanimate himself, returning from death to physically re-emerge within Vader's castle. Vader would ultimately defeat Mammon, but the importance of Mammon's story for Palpatine is clear. In canon, we know it's possible for an ancient Sith to use the dark side, first, to manifest their consciousness in perpetuity through artifacts, and second, to use the dark side to pierce the veil between life and death. Palpatine was aware of the feats of Mammon, discussing it with the ancient Sith himself. Therefore, these abilities could also be learned by Palpatine, forming the basis for his return in Episode 9. There's another potential in canon that could explain Palpatine's return. This is the example of Silo, an Imperial doctor and scientist who created a crude system of immortality for himself through cybernetics and science. In the 2015 Darth Vader comic series, Silo would be killed due to his torture ordered by Vader when trying to discover the nature of his work. However, Silo would return the very next issue, revealing that upon his death, his next body was activated, and thanks to the creation of a guideline to simulate his personality in memory banks, Silo was able to develop a method of immortality, ensuring his reanimation in perpetuity. This Vader comic series shows that Palpatine knew of Silo's work and his version to cheat death, being the person to turn to Silo for replacements for his apprentice. Palpatine could use a similar method, implementing a cloning procedure that created a new body for him, and then using memory banks and other scientific calculations to approximate Palpatine's personality and consciousness. The examples of Lord Mammon and Silo present other possibilities in canon for how Palpatine could return in the Rise of Skywalker, one method relying on the Force and the other on cybernetics and cloning. But regardless, I believe there's a far better explanation that currently exists in canon to explain how Palpatine will return, building off the information from part 1 of this video. This is the long-term plan developed by Palpatine, known as the Contingency. Developed should the Sith Lord face a failed Empire and apprentice, and actually triggered by Palpatine in the Empire's End novel. 3 decades before the fall of Palpatine's empire, before even the Clone War, Palpatine and his advisor and friend Yuptashu traveled to the planet of Jakku, locating a place of importance to be excavated and defended. In the novel Aftermath Life Debt, Palpatine would locate a boy from Jakku named Gallius Rax, who stowed away upon his starship. Palpatine sensed a unique destiny within the boy connected to his future plans, and when questioned, Gallius accepted Palpatine's offer to achieve a life of greater purpose. Palpatine first ordered Gallius to go back to Jakku to defend the area where Palpatine's droids were excavating, telling the boy the place was significant for the galaxy at large. Gallius succeeded in guarding the location for 5 years before Palpatine returned, helping ensure the laboratory, known only as the Observatory, was completed. With the observatory finished, Gallius left Jakku and was brought into the Empire as a so-called Fleet Admiral, remaining a shadowy figure within the Imperial hierarchy. More importantly, Gallius was put in charge of the Contingency, the plan later executed by Palpatine during the events of Episode 6. But what exactly is this Contingency, and how does the observatory on Jakku connect to Palpatine's return in Episode 9? The Jakku Observatory was one of many similar structures across the galaxy, which, like the one on Jakku, were established before Palpatine's rise to Emperor. They all had their own unique purpose and function, but all looked beyond the edges of the known galaxy in every direction. The Jakku Observatory was dedicated to a single function, Palpatine's Contingency. Gallius recognized that while Palpatine had confidence in his empire, he wasn't delusional about the state of the galaxy. Thus, as a master tactician, Palpatine knew how to play a game so long, the horizon was actually the starting line. The Jakku Observatory was part of this long game, a new starting line representing a new phase in Palpatine's goals. The observatory housed a bank of ancient computer systems from a far earlier civilization of unknown origins. Since Palpatine and Gallius began their efforts decades earlier, this computational system was set to one task: to build a star map for travel within the unknown regions. To achieve this, the computer mechanisms in the observatory were continuously charting a path through the dangerous labyrinth of solar storms, black holes, gravity wells, and other phenomenon that made travel impossible. This was combined with the knowledge of Thrawn, who upon joining the ranks of the Empire, added his knowledge about traversing the unknown regions, allowing the Empire to conquer more and more of this unknown space. Palpatine had 2 clear goals with these efforts. First, he wanted to find a way into the unknown regions so that he could conquer it and bring it under the authority of the Empire. The entire galaxy was to be his, and even more, it was to be one of many, as Palpatine dominated the unexplored infinity beyond his known galaxy. The second goal was connected to the Contingency and Palpatine's plan should the Empire fail him. As we saw in Part 1, Palpatine knew if his empire failed, he would need a new game board to carry out his goals. The Empire wouldn't be fit to continue, and must be broken to usher in a new reign for Palpatine. The Jakku Observatory was to find a course through the unknown regions, so the best and most loyal elements of the Empire could escape to rebuild their war machine, away from the watchful eyes found within the known galaxy. To help ensure the rebirth of a stronger empire, the unknown regions was secretly outfitted with shipyards, laboratories, and storehouses, aiding the Imperial remnant re-establish its resources. These efforts were simultaneously implemented in secret as the Jakku Observatory plotted its course through the unknown regions. With those efforts in motion, following the Battle of Endor, Palpatine, through the assistance of messenger droids, would order the most loyal elements of the Empire to carry out Operation Cinder in furtherance of the Contingency. Cinder was aimed at devastating several planets under the command of the Empire, including Naboo, Vardos, Comenor, and the mining planet Burnin Cone. And yet, there was a further third element to the Contingency. Gallius was to stage a massive battle on the planet of Jakku, one that would see the Galactic Empire concentrate its remaining forces to meet the fleet of the New Republic. While the battle itself was planned to destroy much of the resources of the 2 opposing sides, Palpatine wanted even more. Using the spark of life energy that still remained within the core of Jakku, and utilizing a borehole that was drilled down into the molten core of the planet, Gallius was to trigger an explosion that would blow up the entire planet. The resulting explosion was to destroy every Imperial and New Republic military asset present, including capital ships, starfighters, soldiers, vehicles, and the hierarchies of both sides. While Operation Cinder and the planetary destruction of Jakku were ultimately thwarted, the overall efforts of Palpatine's Contingency were a clear success. Cinder devastated the galaxy for roughly 3 months after Endor. The Battle of Jakku destroyed much of the remaining Imperial and New Republic forces, and the chosen few comprising the Imperial remnant were safely within the unknown regions to rebuild. Palpatine's overall goal was achieved despite the failures. He reset the galaxy in a way that would give him an advantage in the future. What remained of the New Republic was forced to rebuild after Cinder and Jakku, while the strongest elements of the Empire gathered strength in the unknown regions. But despite all the preparations and planning that went into the contingency, what good would it be without Palpatine himself? Who cares about the events post-Endor if Palpatine wasn't alive to take advantage of them? Assuming Palpatine was killed on the second Death Star, the contingency appears to be nothing more than the pathetic vengeance of a defeated leader from beyond the grave, one that was meaningless to the plan's creator, despite the future emergence of the First Order. How can Palpatine be seen as a master tactician if he didn't even plan for his own survival? This is where the real fun begins. Given Palpatine's potential return in Episode 9, I believe we can recognize a fourth element that served as the most important component of Palpatine's contingency, following the failure of his Empire invader. The plan for Palpatine's own survival, allowing him to return at a time of his choosing. As the First Order gathered strength in the unknown regions, and the New Republic focused on rebuilding after a brutal era of Imperial dominance, Palpatine set the stage for his return. Looking back on the events that occurred decades earlier, Snoke recognized the genius in Palpatine's plan. Having full knowledge of the contingency, Snoke knew it was a way to punish the Empire that failed its Emperor, and build a stronger Empire in the unknown regions, with the Jakku Observatory being crucial to Palpatine's plan. But as seen within the Last Jedi novelization, Snoke also knew the other great importance of the Jakku Observatory. The computations that plotted a course through the unknown regions weren't merely for the Imperial remnant after Jakku. There was a second purpose that served Palpatine and Palpatine alone, speaking to the Dark Lord Sith identity and his goals with the dark side. Completely understood by Snoke, Palpatine knew that the ancient knowledge of the Force originated upon the long-abandoned, half-legendary star systems within the unknown regions. Snoke had a personal understanding of this knowledge himself, and knew why Palpatine wished to rediscover the great truths about the Force that had been lost to the known galaxy. And Snoke was exactly right, as Gallius also referenced Palpatine's desire to uncover knowledge about the dark side within the unknown regions. Gallius wasn't Force-sensitive like Snoke was, but there was no doubt Gallius recognized Palpatine was obsessed with some unforeseen presence beyond the edges of the known galaxy. As seen in Empire's End, Palpatine was convinced something waited for him beyond the edges of the known galaxy. Something connected to the origin of the Force, a dark presence that was formed of a malevolent substance deep within the unknown regions. Obtaining knowledge about this dark presence became part of the important mission undertaken at the Jakku Observatory. And this is the most important point. Empire's End makes it clear that at some point before the Battle of Endor and Palpatine's death, the ancient computers within the observatory finished their calculations. Not only did the Imperial remnant have a way to escape into the unknown regions, but Palpatine finally found a way through the unknown to this dark presence, connected to some origin of the Force. In fact, Palpatine spoke of the dark presence to Gallius after the path was discovered. The Sith Lord believed his own connection to it increased, feeling new waves radiating out from the origin point that weren't perceivable before the computers found a way to it. Palpatine told Gallius this was a signal to him directly, one that only he was aware of, as not even Vader could sense the dark presence that lay beyond. Therefore, this dark presence was a singular obsession for Palpatine, and he was granted a way to find out what it was after decades of waiting for the path to be forged. I believe Palpatine traveled to the unknown regions to discover this malevolent dark side presence connected to the origin of the Force as understood even by Snoke. His obsession with it was far too great to wait once the path was discovered. It speaks to Palpatine's desire to forge a path through the unknown regions and to utilize tools that would serve as windows into the ancient history of the Force, which has been established as an important desire for Palpatine within canon. This origin of the Force could very well serve as something similar to the wellspring of life found by the Jedi in the Clone Wars TV series. Located within the deep core, this planet was a powerful nexus, strong in the light side of the Force, and was the origin of the galaxy's midichlorians, and in turn, the source of life in the galaxy. This was the planet upon which Qui-Gon and Yoda would learn the secret of immortality through the light side of the Force, manifesting their consciousness as Force ghosts. I believe the Dark Presence will be of equal importance for Palpatine. Whereas the Wellspring of Life taught the Jedi to achieve immortality through the light side, Palpatine's Dark Presence in the unknown regions will show him a similar version of immortality through the dark side, allowing for his return in Episode 9. This would represent knowledge Palpatine wanted for decades, telling Thrawn he long believed there was great potential within the unknown regions. Everything points to Palpatine's planned return through the Contingency. His friend and advisor Yub Tashu provided numerous hints that Palpatine would return following the Battle of Endor, seen within the Aftermath trilogy. In the first novel of the trilogy, Tashu was adamant the dark side would be Palpatine's savior, its power originating from within the unknown regions, suggesting the Emperor would be saved by the source of the dark side beyond the edges of their maps. Even with Gallius, Tashu was confident Palpatine's contingency wasn't only planned perfectly, but it would culminate in the return of the Sith Lord. In Empire's End, Tashu told Gallius, "Palpatine lives on. We will find him again out there in the dark. Everything has arranged itself as our master foretold. All things move towards the great design. The sacrifices have all been made." Therefore, we see one of Palpatine's closest advisors believed everything that occurred between the one-year period from the Battle of Endor to the Battle of Jakku developed just as Palpatine had foreseen it. More importantly, Tashu believed that Palpatine didn't just live on, but would be found again in the darkness emanating within the unknown regions, the one place that became a singular obsession for Palpatine and the focus of his efforts that would last decades. And knowing what we know going into Episode 9, it's difficult to argue that the Contingency didn't proceed exactly as Palpatine wanted. With the Empire and Vader having failed him, Palpatine reset the Galactic Order. The weakness of the Empire was purged. The New Republic was left to rebuild a broken galaxy. The Imperial Remnant was rebuilding beyond the galactic edges, and the galaxy falsely believed Palpatine was dead, using his knowledge obtained in the unknown regions to return at a point of his choosing. The last point is perhaps the most important. Despite knowing a moment of chaos approached at Endor, Palpatine couldn't simply disappear and escape into the shadows. Otherwise, the New Republic would build up their military for the Sith Lord's inevitable return to challenge him. Instead, following Mon Mothma's vision, the New Republic demilitarized, focusing on peace, believing the days of the Emperor were over. As Tashu predicted, the galaxy moved towards Palpatine's great design. Just as Palpatine revealed to Gallius in the moments prior to executing the Contingency before the Battle of Endor, the demonstration of his true power wouldn't be in defeating Luke and Vader, or even turning Luke to the dark side. The true demonstration of his power would come if he failed in turning Luke. It would be at that point when he would utilize the knowledge obtained in the unknown regions to cheat death and prove how successfully he prepared for his long game through the Contingency, to be the master tactician ready to deal with the failure of the Empire and Vader. As he told Gallius then, he would win one way or another, and in Episode 9, his return will prove that at least as it relates to the Contingency, he did.